Good day everyone, I am Miss Jimray Sarmento and I will be with you throughout this day. So for today, we will discuss about two topics. So these are the principles of growth and development and psychoanalytic theory. So first, let us tackle principles of growth and development. So there are three principles of growth and development. So first, the cephalocaudal principle. Second, the proximodistal principle. Third one is the orthogenetic principle. So these predictable patterns of growth and development allow us to predict on how and when most children will develop certain characteristics. So class, while this universal principle exists, and we can predict that certain growth and development will take place during certain periods. So it is also important to recognize individual differences in rates of development are normal. So this is why most stages of development are described as occurring within an age range rather than a specific time. This principle is cephalocaudal principle. So, the cephalocaudal principle refers to the general pattern of a physical and motoric development followed from infancy into toddlerhood and even in early childhood, whereby development follows a head-to-toe progression. According to the cephalocaudal principle, a child will gain physical control of their head first. After this, physical control will move downward to the arms and lastly to the legs. For cephalocaudal principle. So imagine that you are holding a newborn baby. So you have to carefully support the baby's head because the baby is not strong enough to support its head by itself. So by the time the child is 2 months old, it develops enough strength to hold its head upon on its own and to control its facial movements. So over the next few months, the baby gains control over the use of its arms. So the baby can lift itself and it can reach for objects. So finally, the child learns to control leg movements and to crawl and to stand and to walk. So you have noticed that some of the newborn child, so you have to carefully support its head because it cannot carry its head by its own. So now, the second principle is proximodistal principle. So these principles state that development proceeds from the center of the body outward. Proximodistal principle, the direction of the development during both prenatal and both postnatal stages may either be from head to foot, from the central axis to the extremities of the body. The spinal cord develops before outer parts of the body. So the child's arms develop before the hands and feet develops before the fingers and the toes. So fingers and toe muscles are the last to develop in physical development. We're down to the last principle. This is the orthogenetic principle. So this principle states that the hypothesis that development of all aspects of functioning, including the cognition, perception, etc., progresses from the lack of differentiation to increasing of differentiation, articulation, and hierarchic integration. In orthogenetic principle, the hypothesis postulating that growth of all facets of operating moves along from the absence of differentiation to escalating differentiation, annunciation, and hierarchic integration. Take note that Heinz Werner was the individual proponent of the orthogenetic principle. So now let us move on to the second discussion. So it is about psychoanalytic theory. So we all know that psychoanalytic theory is a theory of personality organization and the dynamics of personality development that guides psychoanalysis, a clinic method for treating psychopathology. So first laid out by Sigmund Freud in the late 19th century. So psychoanalytic theory has undergone many refinements since his work. So, The id, ego, and superego are a set of three concepts in psychoanalytic theory describing the distinct interacting agent in the psych apparatus. So the three agents are theoretical constructs that describe the activities and interaction of the mental life of a person. So first, let us define what is id. So, the id is the personality component made up of unconscious psych energy that works to satisfy basic urges, needs, and desires of a human. Take note that id is an instinct. The id is driven by the pleasure principle, which strive for immediate gratification of desire, wants, and needs. So, if the needs are not satisfied immediately, the result is a state of anxiety or tension. For example, an increase in hunger or thirst should produce an immediate attempt to eat or drink. So the id is very important early in life because it ensures that an infant's needs are met. So if the infant is hungry or uncomfortable, they will cry and then the parents will give them food to eat. Now let's proceed to the ego. So the ego is the psychological component of the personality that is represented by our decision-making process. So our behavior is determined by the ego's interaction with the id and the superego. So when we say id, it is instinctual and biological component, while superego is the social component of our personality. So, the ego operates based on the reality principle, which strives to satisfy the id's desires in realistic and socially appropriate ways. So, the reality principles weighs the cost and benefits of an action before deciding to act upon or abandon impulses. So, in many cases, the id impulses can be satisfied through a process of delayed gratification. So the ego will eventually allow the behavior, but only in the appropriate time and place. So the third in psychoanalytic theory is superego. We all know that superego is morality. So the superego is defined as the component of personality composed of the internalized ideas that we have acquired from our parents and in the society. So the superego works to suppress the urges of the id and tries to make the ego behave morally rather than realistically. So take note that the ego has two parts. So the conscience and the ego ideal. So when we say the conscience, it includes the information about things that are viewed as bad by the parents and the society. While we say the ego ideal, it includes the rules and standard for behavior that the ego aspires to. So the superego strives to perfect and civilize our behavior. So it works to suppress all unacceptable urges of the id and struggles to make the ego act upon the idealistic standards rather than upon realistic principle. So the superego is present in the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. Always remember that when talking about the id, the ego, and the superego, it is important to remember that these are not three separate entities which clearly define boundaries. So these aspects are dynamic and always interacting to influence an individual overall personality and behavior. So with many competing forces, it is easy to see how conflict might arise between the id, the ego, and the superego. So Freud used the term ego strength to refer to the ego's ability to function despite these dueling forces. So remember that a person who has good strength can effectively manage these pressures, while a person with too much or too little ego strength can be unyielding or disrupted. So class, that ends the discussion of the two topics, which are the principles of growth development and the psychoanalytic theory. I hope you learned something from my discussion. Thank you for watching and God bless.